So let me show you this match move, which within probably the next couple weeks we'll get you an example of this. So this is it's kind of working right now, but we'll go back to this. So this is motion capture that was captured here of our little gremlin, and I'll show you the, now this is still a rough render, so this isn't the final at all. There's the toes are going through the ground a little bit, and the tracking isn't done, and the lighting isn't done, but this was just me testing it. So, so there's parts of it. So there's a couple things. Again, the thing is that you can see it's a good start as we work on the lighting, as we fix the feet, as we get motion blur. I started doing a motion blur. The motion blur render takes a long time. So this was only a couple frames because it was taking a long time. But you can see how even just that little bit, this little motion blur here, with a little bit better rendering, starts to make it look a little bit more realistic. And so as we get the lighting matched up, right now the color isn't quite right. We don't have any shadows for his feet. These guys are working on some more models and so on and so forth. But this is what's interesting is that what's important is that he's also moving. Not only is he being animated, but you can see he's moving with the camera. So all the little bounces and everything else that the camera has, he's connected so that his feet look like it. And when I started working on Star Wars, just so you know, someone had to do that by hand. They had to match move that. They'd move the camera, and then they'd go to another frame, and they'd move the camera, like rotoscoping, but for camera motion. So this is coming a long way, from where it used to be. So anyway, within the next month, we're going to make these files available. It could happen faster. Usually, to my wife's upset, usually when I get a break, I have a couple of days where I don't have a lot to do. I usually work on stuff like this. I'm like, oh, let's play with this a little bit more. So, so hopefully sooner, but within the next month, we're going to make sure that you have at least these files, and maybe some better ones if these guys get another model done. My suggestion is to try to do this. I'm gonna do some quick little videos on how to do it. And my suggestion is all of you, no matter what your skill set is, just watch a couple of the videos, get the files, and try it. And then talk amongst yourselves and figure it all out and everything else. But when you see those videos go up and you see sample files go up from me, you definitely want to just give it a shot. There's nobody here that can't do it. It might be harder for some of you than others, but you'll learn. You'll learn from doing it. So I'll show you what it looks like when you actually make that work. So to do this, create a new file. And then all I did was I went up here to Motion Tracker, and I just added a motion tracker. And then in here, I selected a file. I believe it was this one. So there's the file. And now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at it. It's resampling it right here. I don't like the resampling. I don't think it's accurate enough. So I tend to turn this all the way back up again to 100%. And then when I go into the 2D tracking, so the first thing you have to do is track points. So you have to track all these little points here, grab things and track them and just figure out where they are. Now, I use 2,000 points. We're going to stick with 300, otherwise it will take us forever. But I allow them to be a little closer together. And then I was like, create auto track. So here's all those points. So what it did is it automatically grabbed things that it thinks has enough detail. It can tell what that is. Oh, I've got something I think I can track. And then when I say auto track it, you'll see it. So down here, you're seeing it's processing the frames. So now what it's doing is it's taking all those points and it's following them along. Every frame, it's just kind of following along to see where they're at, to see how it works here, to try to figure out, because what we're trying to do is figure out where that camera is. We're reproducing the camera position in cinema just from the video. So, and it'll go slower when you do it the way you can really go out and have a coffee. when you do full resolution on the max, it'll take a little while to put it together. So now, when I hit play, well, you'll start to see it move here in a second. But you'll see how those points, now some of those points is losing. When they disappear, it means it lost them. But you see how it's kind of keeping some of them in track? So those are the points, and this may not have been enough points to do it. Hold on, let me see. Yeah, it's losing a lot of them. That's why I added so many more. But I'll give you at least an idea. And then from there, I'll go into reconstruction. Now, one of the things that was important is you'll notice a little thing here that says focal length, and it says unknown but constant. That means you didn't change the zoom. And we were using what's called a prime lens, so I know what the focal length was. The focal length, I can say it's known and constant. And this focal length is, I know that it's 18 millimeters because it said on the outside of the lens. So it's 18 millimeters. The one thing that I don't know is my sensor size. So how big is the film gate? How big is that sensor on the camera? Because figuring out where all those points are in 3D, we have to figure that out. I did not measure it, because that would require opening the camera and putting a little, some kind of measuring in there. What I did is I went to a website called Able Cine, and they have this thing called FOV, and I went in here and said, I have a Sony F3. There it is, F3. And it tells me down here that it's 23.6 millimeters. So whatever camera I had, I just had to figure that out. So now I go back here, and I say 26.3 millimeters. I'm doing something wrong here, hold on. Or 23.6, right? Did it backwards. And when I do this, I'll give this 18. And it will also tell me, so when I said 23.6, here's 18 millimeters. My focal size is 23.6. 66, this is 66.494. And if I look at the math on the website, this is for cameras, it says it should be 66.5. So I'm very, very close. I'm within 1,000th of a, or 6,000th of a degree. So it's good enough. So now I know that what I've set in Cinema is the same as what it should be for that camera. So now what I'll do is I'll tell it, once I've set those, to run the 3D solver. So now what it's going to do is it's going to go through here and it's going to calculate it. So what it's doing is I know what kind of camera I was looking through, and I know where certain points are in the scene, and as they move, I'm going to be able to figure out where the camera was, in that position. So here you can see the camera, and if we move it, you'll see how the camera moves there. Now there's a couple problems with it. One is that you'll notice that the ground plane is kind of all over the place. It's down below where it should be. But what I can do is I can grab one of the markers. Well, I'll select the motion tracker here. And I'll go in here and I'll say I want to constrain the position. And I'll select a marker. So what it did there is it made that marker 0, 0, 0. So it just kind of pulled the scene so that it's sitting at 0, 0, 0. Then I can say I want to constrain, I want to do a planar constraint, which means I'm going to say this marker, and this marker are all on the ground. And I'll say that controls the y-axis. And So now you can see all those points now are right on the ground. And then if I really want to define exactly where the axis is, I can add another constraint that is the vector constraint. And I can say this point and this point are actually the z-axis, and that lines everything up. Kind of pops everything into place. So that creates my ground plane. So now, when I drop the character in, it just lands on the ground. If his scene is on the ground, in my scene, I've created a ground from the motion tracking. I've realigned it, because when it did all the tracking, it says I know where the camera was, but I don't know what up and down is. You know, I don't know where the ground actually is. I just know where the camera was in relationship to the points. So now what I've done with these is I've created the relationships. You know, this is the ground, this is one axis, this is up, you know, that type of thing. So now what that looks like when in the actual shot that I did, this one won't work very well because there's not enough points. But if we go back to this one, you'll see the same constraints here. I'll turn all these auto features on. Now it gets, even my computer gets really slow when I turn them all on. So that's why we didn't do that many for this example, but there's a lot of them. I did 2,000 points instead of 300. I think that's most of them anyway. So you can see all these points that were created that are all lined up. So that took a long time, mostly because every time I moved, it would take a long time to kind of move. So I'm still going to work on getting better at. But the other cool thing about this is when we look at it from a. So here's just the camera, and I'll turn off the background here. Hold on. So one thing that's kind of cool is when I move it around, you can not only see the ground, but you can actually see the building behind it. See all those points? Those are the windows, right? And there's the roof. And so one of the things you can do with that is once you have that information, you can have it you can now put other things into the scene. Like you could have him doing his little dance, but you could also create maybe even something that looked like balls bouncing off the roof and bouncing onto the ground and you know, all kinds of other things that you can have reacting to it and kind of tied into the scene. So there's a lot of different things you can have fun with in this process. And this is something, again, that yesterday I didn't know how to do, so figured it out. And you can do the same thing. Now, what I'm going to try to do is in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to try to give you a cheat sheet, kind of like what I just talked about here, make a little video. My challenge for you is to try it for some of you, especially those of you who have done a little bit more of this, is go ahead and try it before your race is to get this working before I send the tutorials of how to do it, you know, to figure it out. And then, but I would definitely try to do something like that and get a sense of that. That is, again, that's a skill that is very rare here in Rwanda. You know, being able to add a motion capture character to a scene that's being motion tracked or match moved. Probably 95% of the people that in a month, 95% of the people in Rwanda that can do it will be in this building. So you know, there's a real opportunity to get ahead, and we're going to keep on trying to get you ahead by giving you the right skills. Any questions about this? Yeah.
Why are some points looking green while others are looking?
So the question is, why are the points some green and some red or cyan or whatever? These are the points that were tracked well, so that the computer has a high confidence that they're good. So these are good points, and these points back there, it's not sure. You know, so when it tracks these, it'll say these points I really know where they are. These points that are further out in the distance, I'm not sure. So it tells you whether you should be paying which points you should pay attention to. It automatically does that. It just colors them based on whether it thinks that those are good points or not. Other questions? Yeah.
Does it have to be a MOV or does it have to be a picture? Because
it's possible. This is just an MOV.
Okay. So if it was to like, because I see the character is animated. What if you make the background also like cartoonified or something? So
you could totally make a cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could either. So if you make, you could either make the video cartoonified. One thing that you can do, and something to think about, is if you want to have something that feels 3D but is very cartoony, you can build some just basic boxes. So build some little, you can build some very basic models that are very easy to build, then render them out of Cinema as a still.
Inside Cinema 4D.
This is Cinema 4D. So you can render them out, render just the still, take it into Photoshop, and paint it. So just paint on it, and then bring it back into Cinema 4D and do what's called a camera projection. And so what you do is you project from the camera that you rendered from what you painted, and it'll look like it's all mapped onto the, you don't, instead of having to figure out all the texture maps, you can just paint all over them. And that's how they do lots of big matte paintings. But you can also do kind of cartoony things where you just paint on it. And as long as the camera doesn't move too far, it'll look just fine.
So would you use Cinema 4D to create like the environment, or like you draw like the house exactly as it is?
You could definitely use Cinema to do that. Cinema is very good at that. That's what I use for most of what I do is Cinema 4D.
So what if you use a picture, then you try to angle it in?
You can try to angle a picture. You can only angle it so far, but one thing that you can do, again, is you can take a photo of a scene, and you can put blocks where all the buildings are, or all the major things, and then take that photo and project it on, like this projector. See, when I put my hand in front of here, it's projecting an image onto me. Now, I don't match that, so it looks weird. But if I match all of the angles, you could actually take a photo and project it, and it's what we call camera mapping. And it's a very popular way to do big backgrounds, where you don't want to model every little window. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where did you get the body for the character? Because
The body comes with Motion Builder, I believe, right? Yeah, so the body comes with Motion Builder, which is one of the pieces of software that we use to do the motion capture. So it's got some sample bodies, and that's where that came from. One of the things that I'm hoping that someone will build, for some of this is, kind of traditional Rwandan, dancer with the big, but use hair for it. Like use the hair plugins so that it flaps around, and I think that would be really cool. So hopefully you guys will build some of your own models. But this one came with Motion Builder. And again, the best way to learn how to do your own model is to go download some videos. Like look at videos on how to build, and don't try to make it complicated. Do something basic, and then slowly get better at it. Like slowly just improve it. Other questions? Yeah.
I want to ask you a question. When you increase the focal length of the camera, what will be affected the Cinema 4D camera?
Yeah, it would be if you're doing a match move, it would be difficult to match move a focal length that is different than what you had there, and have everything still match up. Now you may be able to take this camera. It may work to try it. So here's our camera here. Call this long lens. And I'm going to open timeline. Yeah, it's going to be really slow because it's there's so many data points, so I'm not going to try to do it in front of you, but I'll work on that. what I was going to try to do, and what you can try to do, is right now there's just a lot, because that motion capture, you can see how it's moving very, very slowly. There's so many data points that it's just taking a long time. But what I was going to do is delete all the animation points for that. Copy the camera, delete all of its points, and then attach it to the other camera, to the camera that was solved. Take a new camera and attach it to the camera that's solved, then make that focal length longer. And it may just move inside of that just fine. What you'd also have to do is have your backplane. The problem that you're going to have is the whole backplane will most likely stretch, but I don't know that until we try it. You'd have to have something that is projecting that image, out from the camera, and you may have trouble changing that focal length. The best thing to do is to use the focal length you want, for the actual shot. And you can do things where you're changing the zoom on the shot, but it's much harder to track that. And so definitely try it, but know that there's zooming, moving camera shots are some of the hardest shots to do because there's so many variables changing at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would like to inquire what other applications work hand in hand with Cinema 4D to come up with a good quality work.
So what other applications should you know that will help with Cinema 4D? So the applications that I would strongly recommend, you need to know Photoshop well. So Photoshop is, you're fixing things constantly in Photoshop. So understanding Photoshop, being able to create texture maps, being able to fix things that you want to fix and change photos and all those things. Photoshop is the absolute must to understand as best you can. The better you are at it, the more you can fix. And then you will also want to know a compositing application, and that can be either Motion or After Effects, typically. At some point, we may try to add Nuke, as a compositor sometime next year. But right now, you can get a lot done in both Motion and Motion and After Effects. So those two are one or the other. You can look at. So those are the core things that you need to know. If you want to know motion capture, then you need to understand Motion Builder. I wouldn't worry as much about motive. If you really want to get into motion capture, then learning motive is good. But you only need a couple of you to know motive, and it works well. But you do need to know Motion Builder. Motion Builder allows you to fix and change the animations. So for instance, if his arms are going like this, and you wish they were up a little higher, in Motion Builder you can change that, so that they go up and higher. Or if you have a fight scene, a lot of times when they're fighting, they're going to come up like this, and they're going to stop right before they hit the person's face, But what you can do is you can say, when he gets to here, just keep going in 3D, and you can even have the head, you can animate the head, but it doesn't change the motion. The motion capture is all there. The head just comes back a little bit further, the hand goes a little bit further, so you can make adjustments. But the best place to do that is in Motion Builder, not in Cinema 4D. So if you're going to do a lot of motion capture work, knowing how to use Motion Builder is important. And then, but being able to work with your textures, being able to then composite. When you see the tutorial that I build for this, you're going to see me render a whole bunch of what we call passes. So I'm going to render the background, and then I'm going to render the shadow of his feet, and then I'm going to render him, and then I'm going to render a couple different things, and then I'm going to go into either After Effects or Motion, and I'm going to composite them all together. And then I'm going to change all the transparencies and everything else in my compositing package. I'm not going to try to render a 3D scene. Right here I'm testing it, so I did. But that's not the usual way to do it. The usual way is you'll render out lots of passes, and then you'll composite them back together into one scene. So those are you can go there's all kinds of applications that you'll learn. That you'll do little bits and pieces of different things. But those are the core applications. Photoshop, either After Effects or Motion, Motion Builder, and Cinema. You can do an enormous amount of work with just those applications. But I would, continue to. There'll be lots of other little applications that you'll add to that as well. Illustrator is a good one because Illustrator will make it easier for you to do things like build things that are graphic. That you wouldn't want to necessarily build in Photoshop. So, other questions? Yeah.
Do they have the software
Yeah.
as we have here? Or?
So many large film production definitely, large visual effects houses definitely have their own special software that they've written to do what they needed to do. We don't have that yet because we don't have programmers here to do that. But there's an enormous amount of work. Probably 80–90% of what you see on TV is done with off-the-shelf software. So it's only the very, very high end where they start to build their own. And if you look at Conduit, which is we use in the green screen downstairs, that's what we wrote to do what we needed to do. And so a lot of times they're fixing things that they need. You know, and so there, I think that there's a lot of opportunity. Eventually we will write our own software here when we have some, when some of you start to be ready to write software. And we'll give some of you an opportunity if you want to learn how to code. I'm working on, it'll be another year or two before we start really trying to code. Right now, I just want to get everyone using the software. A great way to get started, if you're interested, is that for many of these, there's little plugins, whether it's Photoshop or Cinema or even Motion Builder, where you can write Python scripts, you can write small bits of code to do things. The best way to get started is to start playing with that.
So I was wondering if they use Cinema 4D and After Effects and Photoshop, or
Yeah, there's definitely many companies that are using Cinema 4D and Photoshop's used everywhere. After Effects is used a lot, and Cinema 4D is used for many commercials and many motion graphics and also in match paint, match moving and more of a 3D work as well.
So how about the computers and GPUs, graphics card?
With the computers with GPUs, yeah, I mean all of this stuff is, a GPU will help it go faster, but it's, the most important thing to make it go fast is being able to approach it right. One of the things is that you don't want to render everything at high resolution all the time or work at it. You want to look at, anytime you're slowed down, well, for me, anytime I get slowed down, I figure out how to make that stop. So like if I, with this, how do I hide certain things? How do I turn certain things on and off so that I can keep on moving quickly? That doesn't have to do with the GPU. GPUs are fine, but it doesn't mean that you can't. Mostly, when I started doing this, I had very, very slow computers. And I would render little versions of it like this big to make sure it was working. And all day, I would do things like when I would render out examples all day and little tests, but I wouldn't do the high resolution render until I was going to lunch or I was going home. And then I would turn up all the knobs and I would say, okay, now I've got 8 hours to render, but I would never render something that took more than a little bit of time. If I wanted to take a coffee break, I would render out a little test and go get a coffee. If I wanted to take lunch, I'd figure out about how long something took, about an hour to render, and then I'd go do that. And then when I wanted to do a big render to test it, I would then render it all night. But you don't want to use your time to render. You don't want the computer, if the computer is working, it should do that at night. It should do it when you're not doing it. And I think that Ryan has kind of worked on, we're either done with it or we're getting closer. I think that the new version is having a little bit of trouble that they're updating, but when they finish it, we're going to have all these computers eventually on a network within the next 6 months, which means you can render at night to all the computers at the same time. So now we can do really, really complicated renders with the right lighting and all kinds of other things, and let it render, and it'll render on 40 computers all at the same time, and then bring those frames back. And when you come in the morning, it'll be done. Even if it was taking on 40 computers, even if it takes an hour a frame, you could do a 10-second animation, overnight, that take a long time. So that's something that we're kind of moving towards as well. Yeah.
Yeah. The other question is, some of us are beginners.
Yep.
In probably animation or these other applications. What would be the best resource base for great ideas?
Right, so the question is what are the best resources as you're beginning to move forward? The number one resource is to make sure work through those tutorials as fast as you can. The starting tutorials, start working through those as fast as you can. And then you'll see I think there's other training that I did over the last few years that I think is available here. Those are all very useful things to do. Also, if you get a chance to work with some of the more advanced students who may just need extra people, try to apply yourself to that. So try to work on stuff. When I send, for instance, no matter how much you're starting, when I send this challenge down, try to do it. And you will fail, and it'll be difficult, and then you'll figure it out. Ask other people. Ask anybody who has it working, that's the person to ask. Once they have it working, then ask them how to do that. Also look at opportunities to shoot in the green screen. Look at opportunities to shoot little, interviews with folks. The only way to really get, good at all of this is to just do lots of it. So you want to take full advantage of the fact that there's a lot of equipment here. There's some people here that know how to use it, and ask questions. See if you can work. See if you can, do those types of things. If you're just getting started, the best thing to do is to do the challenges, as well as doing the offer to help anywhere you can, but also do the challenges and do all the video training you can find, and be ready when we start doing more of the video training. Even if you don't understand it yet, come to the video training and watch, these other guys have conversations with us about how it gets done. You may not understand all of it. That's not, you just want to keep on absorbing, from the more advanced students as best you can. Anytime someone says, hey, I'm doing a shoot, a lot of times some of the more advanced students that have been here might want to do a green screen shoot. They might want to do a motion capture. They might want to do something where they need a little bit of help. If you're a starting student, you want to be first in line, just to run cables or hold up a light. Because what you want to do is you want to be able to see what that looks like. You want to get experience in just seeing what they're doing and seeing how it works. Next year, we're going to send some more guys down that have done a lot of shooting. And when they're doing shoots, you definitely want to try to help. The problem that we should have here is that when we say, hey, we are looking for people, that we get too many people. Because that's how you're going to learn, is to get involved in the projects. But the first thing to do is to work through the tutorials, show that you can do that, work really hard at it, and make sure that when you get these challenges, that even if you've never done it before, don't be afraid. Just try it. Ask questions, search on Google. But anytime you see someone else who's finished a challenge, you can, ask them, how they did it. When you're stuck somewhere, go to someone who's ahead of you and ask them. When you're ahead, when you've succeeded, look for someone else that you can help. You helping them will actually make you understand it better than when you just did it. It's one thing to survive, and it's another thing to be able to explain it. When you're able to explain it of exactly why it worked and exactly how it's working and exactly what to do, you truly know it. When you're only able to just get it out the other end, when you're only able to just complete it, that's only the first step. So, if you're advanced, you should be looking for people that you can help. If you're beginning, look for anyone ahead of you and find, and ask them for some help. Trying to figure it out. Don't badger them. Make sure that they're doing their work, but definitely look for other people around you that you can get a little help, and not just the monitors. It's actually more valuable to the students. It's more valuable to you to be asking other students before you ask the monitors. Your lab monitor should be your last resort, not your first one. The other students working with, as you work together with other students, you're going to learn, all of you will learn more than if you simply go to the lab monitor for questions. So, but the key is that what will make this industry is not that you are successful. What will make an industry in Rwanda is that all of you are successful. You can't bring big films. We can't do Toy Story. We can't do Star Wars. We can't do anything like that until there's 150 advanced people here. So all of the cool big events our big projects that we want to work on require lots of us to be able to do it, not just one person. You know, you can have lots of little projects and you'll have a little business, but if we want to turn this into an industry and create real movies, we need lots of people to know it. So helping everyone around you, all of you have to move forward, you know, for this to work. So just something to think about. Any other questions? Yeah.
You can't get anything without working in a group.
Yeah, you can get something without working in a group. I mean, you can move along and you can develop yourself, but the most exciting things that we'll get to work on as big groups. When you look at the end of a movie, you don't see 3 people, you know, at the end of the movie. You see 3,000 people at the end of a big film, or 300 people, you know. And if we want to do that in Rwanda, we have to figure out a way to have 300, 150 or 300 or 3,000 Rwandans able to do that, so that the movies can be made here. You know, what I'm doing in the U.S. is constantly trying to sell the idea that we can make movies in Rwanda. You know, because it takes years. You know, so if I'm talking to a producer now, it might take 2 years to get the money, so I have to start talking now. So I'm hoping that when I kick the ball down the field, you guys are on the other side. So the main thing is that you really have to look at this as all of you have to be successful. And you want to be looking, and as more and more of you get more advanced, you will all learn faster. Because the more people that are getting to a certain level, it accelerates. You know, I didn't go to school, but when I worked at Lucasfilm and Industrial Light and Magic, everyone around me was the best in the world at what they did. So when I didn't know how to do something, I'd ask someone and boom, they had an answer. They were able to answer my question very, very quickly. You want to get to a point here where there's lots of people that are at the same level. If you're ahead of everyone right now, look for ways that you can bring other people up, because eventually they will be going down some other path and they'll figure something out that you haven't. You know, and all of you working together will accelerate how fast you learn. So it's very important to think about working as a group and moving forward. Not just what you need to know, but really getting everyone else, you know, to move forward. Because it's not going to grow with 10 or 15 or 20 people that know how to do this. We need to have hundreds. You know, this is just the beginning. Other questions?
Is it possible to do the color correction with the Cinema 4D?
No, you wouldn't do color correction in Cinema 4D. You would get it close, and then you're going to take it to another application. Now, the way that you would do that is you might do it in your editing package, like Final Cut. You might do it in After Effects. A lot of people will do it in a program called Resolve, which we don't have yet because we haven't needed it. But I'm not, you know, we can get it. As you guys get to a certain level, we'll get Resolve. It's not very, you know, it's, it can be got. The Resolve is a program that's just designed to do color correction. And we don't have enough space, because one of the things we need to do is we need to have a room. When you start doing real color correction, you need a room that is all gray and nothing else is going on in it, and there's no windows. You don't want to have any light going in or anything else. When you're doing like real film production, you know, you can do all the color correction you need right now, you know, on these computers with Final Cut, and you can get everything looking very good. When you decide you want to do a high-end color correction, then we're going to need a room with the color correction and the hardware and everything else. And we're working on it, but we haven't gotten to the point where we're doing work that requires that yet. But that, and then you basically, some of you will become colorists. And that's all. There are people in Los Angeles, all they do all day is color correct films. They don't know how to animate. They don't know how to do any other compositing. They just sit there with these little roller balls, just, you know, color correcting things. And using what they call power windows. So you'll see more of that. That is something we'll do in the future, just not yet. When you're able to do lots of this and it looks photoreal, and you're able to do a lot of it so that we can actually get commercials done and everything else, then we get to a point where we need to have, you know, much more color correction. And that's when we'll start doing that. Other questions? Yep.
So I would like you to talk about this effect where objects and people freeze and some other people come passing through them.
So a couple things. In some of those cases, if you actually look at that, the people actually stood really still. I mean, they literally, some of them they didn't actually freeze. The people in the background froze. What they did is you'll notice that a lot of times the camera's not moving. When they freeze, the camera stays where it is. It's locked off. And that means that you can walk between things and you'll have to rotoscope them. You cut the people out, but they're frozen, and then you can walk between them. But as long as the camera doesn't move, it's easy. When the camera starts to move, then you really have to, it's a lot harder if everyone's really frozen. But really, you're just freezing you're freezing the video, and then you're cutting out things that you want to go behind, by hand. Not by hand, but, in the computer. And then that creates a map that will allow the person to walk behind it. It's a good question. Anything else? Any other questions?
Is there a mirror effect in cinema?
Is there a mirror effect? Yes. So absolutely. So you can definitely do reflections in cinema. There's so for instance, if I take this material and I make it, I'm going to turn this off here. And they've changed all the only reason I'm confused is they've changed my, my settings. Let's try it here. Sorry? Oh, I didn't add it to it. Yep, hold on. Oh, you add the reflection layer? Yeah. Okay, hold on. Sorry. And we'll add this to this. I finally got R16 installed. There we go. So while we're talking, it'll render. Other questions? And this is rendering pretty quickly. When I was rendering with motion blur and the global illumination, it was taking about 45 seconds for every frame. So this is a little bit faster. But you can see it if we, I can go ahead while it's doing this and hit play. He looks very content doing his thing. He's in a very good mood. So anyway, so you can imagine for anyone who's started to do some of the animations, how long that would take to do that by hand. And it would be very hard because most of us aren't, an expert at this dance. So it would be easier, it's easier for someone who knows what they're doing to just do it, and then you capture it and you're able to apply it to the character. Any questions about that? And if you think this is cool, then you should be doing it. If you think this is a cool thing to do, then learn how to do it. Yeah.
I have a serious question. Because when you look at the character itself, it's like, let's say I'm standing straight and I'm not doing anything. And how comes when you animate, the head goes this way, like it's not connected to the body?
So the question is when you're animating, why the head goes one way and everything else. You're talking about when it, you mean for this or for in a regular one?
This one.
Well, that's what he was doing with his head when we did it. I mean, that's what that person was doing when we captured it. That's how he was moving his head. So that was the way that that's the way that the actor did it. Other questions? All right. Okay, well, hope you enjoyed that. Definitely, if you think this is cool, you should learn how to do it. You should you come up and get in the suit. You can, if you want to do your own animations, work with these guys and get into the suit, move around a little bit, and then get them to send you back the raw data and start playing with it. So, very good. All right. Well, thanks for coming out on a Friday night. I hope this was fun for you. Hopefully, it was useful. I will be back either I'll actually be back either in February or March, but probably in January and February I'll start to do some more virtual classes. So I'll work with this challenge as well as a couple other ones, and we're lining up some other instructors for you. So definitely come and join us for those. And when you find out about them, they're just, even if they're not something you're doing yet, it really is useful to come and to see them. So very good. All right. Thank you very much.